Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, The Intersection. In this short and brief video, I will cover NFA exercises with you. My goal is to keep this video short and concise and very informative. So let's start. Our first example, it says construct an NFA that accepts a string if it contains a 1 followed by any number of zeros. A1 followed by any number of zeros. And we are dealing with an NFA, so let's first recognize what's the alphabet. And the alphabet is the sigma, and the alphabet in this case is 0 and 1. And then the states Q, and if we have at least 2, then it's going to be, the states will be Q0, Q1, and Q2. And I'm going to leave this, I'll leave a little space like that for a minute. And then the start state will be the Q0. And accept state F, and we will see what it is or what they are if they're more than one. Okay, and then the transition function. And in this case, I will do 2 transition functions. Okay, so the transition function is what we are after. So to draw this, remember a 1, 1 followed by any number of zeros. So here's my Q0, my starting state, and then Q1 and Q2, and Q2 will be my accepting state. Okay, so it contains a 1 followed by any number of zeros. So if I read a 0, on the Q0, it will make no move. I can't go to Q1 on a 0. So I should not read a 0 at Q0 at all. But if I read a 1, I go, or I move to Q1. Now, if I read a 1 here, I move to nowhere. I can't move, can't make any move because it has to be followed by zeros. But if I read a 0, I go to this Q2. If I read more zeros here, yeah, it's okay because 1 0 0 0 1, as long as I have to have 1, that's it. I can just loop it in, and that's my accepting state. Now, what happens if I read a 0 here, and I said we're not going to move anywhere? So that's why we can have what's so-called trash state, dead state. And last night I read some white pages and they call it sink state. All accepted names. You can also, if you want to, you can call it Q3. Some books, they call it Q-trash. So whatever the name, but this one is called a trash state. And if I read a 0 on Q2, a Q1, then I go to the trash state. If I read a 1, not a 0. If I read a 0, I move. If I read a 1 on Q2, I can also move to the trash state. I'm going to draw for you in a table format, or a table, tabulate the transition function for you. You can see here I drew the transition function in a tabulated format, and let's read it all together. So in this case, you see that I have written the Q3 or the Q trash or the Q sync or dead state in red. I put them in red on purpose, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So if we did a 0, we go to Q3. If we did a 1 on Q naught, we go to Q1. On Q1, if we did a 0, we go to Q2. If we read a 1 on Q1, we go to the trash state. Q2 on a 0, we go to Q2. We stay in Q2. And then on a 1, we go to the Q trash. And in the Q trash, if we read any more 1s or 0s, we stay on the Q trash. Okay. Now, that's okay to do that. But if you draw it differently, if you draw it like Q naught, and then input 1, Q2, input 0, and then Q3, Q1, Q2, this Q2, and this is our accepting state. If you do it this way, it's fine too, but then you have to adjust your transition function. Because what we're saying here, is if we read a 0, Q1 is not gonna, we're not gonna move anywhere. We're not gonna move from Q naught to Q1. In this case here, we're saying if we read a 1, we're not moving anywhere. On this here, if we read a 1, we're not moving anywhere, and this is acceptable. But we have to adjust the transition function. This is our input, 0 and 1. And this is Q naught, Q1, and then Q3. And Q3 there. Okay, so no, we don't need the Q2. I'm sorry, Q2. Q1, Q2. We don't do the trash state anymore. We just leave the cell empty. So on Q0, there is no move. We don't put anything here. On Q0 on 1, we move to Q1. On Q1 on 0, we move to Q2. Q1 leads a 1. We're not moving. Q2 reads, when we read a 0 at Q2, we will stay at Q2, and in this here we just leave it like that, empty. So that will depict this drawing. This one will depict this drawing. Now, I said at the beginning, I left this empty on purpose. If I am using this style of drawing, then I will have to put a Q3 here, which is my Q trash. Let's make it in red, Q3 here. If I am using this style of drawing, then my accepting state, the Q in this case, will be Q0, Q1, and Q2. Let's do another exercise. In this second exercise, we are to design an NFA that should accept a string where the third character is 1. So regardless of the first two, we have to have a 1. The third string should be a 1. It doesn't matter what are the first two. Okay, so to recognize that, to start this exercise, we have to recognize the sigma, it's 0 and 1. The states are Q naught, Q1, Q2, Q3, and I left this empty because I'm going to do it both ways. The transition function, I'm going to do it 2 ways. And then the starting states, Q naught, and the accepting states will be, in this case, Q3. So let's draw it quickly. So here we go. This is our starting state, Q naught. And we have to transition to Q2, Q1. And to transition to Q2. And then transition to what we said at our accepting state. So, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what are the first two. It doesn't really matter. We have to move on either one of them. So in this case, if we read a 0, we still move to Q1. If we read a 1, we still move to Q1. So at here, at Q1, we have either a 1 or a 0. Either a 1 or a 0. It doesn't really matter what are the first two. And then on a Q1, again, we need the second character, because the third character, so it really doesn't matter if we can move in both 0 and 1. We can move from Q1 to Q2 on a 0 and 1. So in this case, we might have, in here, we might have 1 1 or 0 0 or 1 0 or 0. It doesn't really matter as long as the third character is 1. Now in this case here, we can only move on 1 because that's the third character in the string. Okay, and in Q3, it doesn't matter if we read more zeros or we read more ones. It doesn't really matter. So again, one more time, it doesn't really matter as long as the third is. Now what happens if we read a 0 here? We read a 0, we say we're not going to move anywhere, or the string is not accepted. Okay, or we can also design a trash state, or sync state, or dead state. We can call it anything we want. These three names are, or some books, Q, trash. Now, we could have not, as I showed you in exercise 1, we could have just like designed it this. Let me go to this side of the paper. A Q naught, that's our starting state, 0 1 to Q1. Either on 0 or 1, I'm going to still move to Q1, and I'm going to still move to Q2 on 0 or 1. And then to go to Q3, only on 1. And ignore in my design the trash state. So now I'm going to I'm going to tabulate the transition function for you. So again, just remember this exercise is to create an NFA that should accept a string with the third character is 1. So that's the only concern. It doesn't matter what the first two are as long as the third one is 1. That's why when we read a 0 here, we cannot move to Q3, the accepting state, because it's the third. When we're here, when we add that Q2, we have a 0 0. So we need now we need a 1 if that's what we're testing for. If we're testing for 0 0 1. If we're testing, let's try it for 1 1 1. 1 1 1. If we try it for 1 1 1, here is we're going to read a 1, and then we move to Q1. We read a 1, we move to Q2. Now I have 1 1, and then we read another 1, we move to Q3. So that's this string is accepted. If we read a 1 0 1, 1 0 1. So now if we read a 1, we move to Q1. Okay, so now we have a 1. If we read a 0, we go to Q2. Now we have our 0. If we read a 1, we go to Q3. Now we have our third one. So that's the idea, is to reach the accepting state. When we read a 0 at Q2, we cannot reach the accepting state because our third character will become a 0, and that's not the idea. The idea is to have a 1 at the third character. So the transition function with this drawing, we have to, if we design it this way with the dead state or the trash state, we have to include it in our transitional function, in our delta, the transitional function. And so I have them in red. If we do it this way, then we leave that's empty. We leave it empty. That's this here. and we do not include the Q4. We don't, or Q trash. I hope this is clear now. Thank you for watching. Good luck, and I'll see you in class. Bye bye now.